The gun pressed against Marcus Webb's spine felt colder than the marble floor of Halloran Tower's executive lobby, and for one suspended heartbeat, he thought of his 6-year-old daughter waiting at the daycare 3 blocks away, wondering why her father was late again. It was 2 in the afternoon on a bright Tuesday, the kind of ordinary day that gives no warning before it shatters. Marcus had spent 11 months clawing his way toward this moment. A final round interview for a logistics manager position at Halloran Industries, the only company in the city that still paid enough to cover both rent and his daughter's medical bills. He had pressed his only good shirt that morning, the iron hissing in the dim light of his apartment kitchen while his daughter, Junie, ate cereal and asked him if today was the day everything would get better. He had told her yes. He needed it to be yes. Before he could even reach the reception desk, 3 men in dark coats stepped out from beside the elevator bank, moving with the unhurried confidence of men who had never once been told no. The tallest of them, a man with a scar that split his eyebrow like a fault line, gripped Marcus by the collar and shoved him against the cold marble pillar in full view of the lobby, in full view of the woman stepping out of the private elevator behind them, a woman in a charcoal suit whom Marcus did not yet know was the CEO of the very company he had come to beg for a chance. "You think you can just disappear, Webb?" the scarred man said, his voice low and venomous, loud enough to silence the lobby's murmur of footsteps and ringing phones. "You think a security badge and a clean shirt make you somebody? You owe Sorrentino money, and Sorrentino does not forget." Before reading further, if you believe people deserve second chances, if you believe kindness can change the course of someone's life, hit that like button right now, drop a comment below, share this video with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House so you never miss a story like this one. Marcus's mind raced backward, to the debt his late wife had quietly taken on during her cancer treatment, loans she never told him about because she did not want him to carry the weight while she was still fighting. She had passed 8 months ago, leaving him a daughter, a stack of unopened envelopes, and a debt collector who worked not through lawyers but through men who broke fingers instead of filing paperwork. Marcus had been paying what he could, scraping together extra shifts at the warehouse, selling his wife's jewelry one piece at a time, but it was never enough, and Sorrentino's patience, it seemed, had finally run dry in the worst possible place at the worst possible moment. The woman in the charcoal suit did not look away. Her name, though Marcus did not know it yet, was Vivian Castellano, and she had built Halloran Industries from a single shipping contract into a logistics empire over 15 years, a feat that had cost her every soft edge she once had and replaced it with something colder, sharper, and far more dangerous than anyone in that lobby understood. She watched the scarred man's hand twist tighter into Marcus's collar, watched the second man's coat shift just enough to reveal the outline of a holster, and instead of calling security, instead of retreating to the safety of her glass office 40 floors up, she walked forward, her heels striking the marble in a rhythm as steady as a held breath. She stopped 3 feet from the men and said nothing at first. She simply looked at the scarred man the way a person looks at something they recognize from a long time ago, something they thought they had buried. Then she leaned in close enough that only the men could hear her, and she said 5 words that emptied the color from the scarred man's face: "You chose the wrong man." The scarred man's grip loosened. His eyes flicked toward his 2 companions, then back to Vivian, searching her face for the joke, the bluff, anything that would let him laugh this off and finish what he came to do. He found nothing. Vivian's gaze did not waver, and something in the stillness of her, something coiled and exact, told him this was not a woman issuing an idle threat. She told him, in a voice barely above a whisper, that Sorrentino did not own this building, did not own this city block, and certainly did not own the man whose collar he was currently creasing, because that man, whether he knew it or not, was standing under her protection now, and anyone who touched him would have to answer not to a debt collector but to people whose names made debt collectors disappear. The truth, which Vivian would only reveal to Marcus much later, was that her own father had been destroyed by men exactly like Sorrentino, decades earlier, when she was a girl not much older than Junie. She had watched loan sharks pick her family apart piece by piece, watched her father's pride crumble into silence and then into an early grave, and she had promised herself, in the bitter years that followed, that if she ever stood close enough to stop that cycle from claiming someone else, she would not hesitate. The scarred man released Marcus, straightened his coat with shaking hands, and muttered something about a misunderstanding, about wrong information, about how Sorrentino's business was Sorrentino's business and had nothing to do with this building. Vivian did not blink. She told him to leave, and to make sure his employer understood that Marcus Webb's debt was no longer his concern. The three men retreated through the glass doors into the afternoon light, and the lobby exhaled, the ordinary sounds of ringing phones and clicking heels slowly returning like a tide coming back in after a storm. Marcus stood frozen against the pillar, his shirt collar still crumpled, his hands trembling in a way he hoped no one could see. He had come here for an interview, for a chance at $38,000 a year and a health plan that might finally cover Junie's asthma medication without him having to choose between her inhaler and the electric bill. He had not come here to be saved by a stranger in a tailored suit, and the shame of being seen so exposed, so powerless, burned hotter in his chest than any fear the scarred man had put there. Vivian seemed to understand this without him saying a word. She did not offer pity, because pity was the last thing a man like Marcus needed in that moment. Instead, she asked him, in a voice that had softened just slightly from the one she used on Sorrentino's men, whether he still wanted the job. Marcus, still catching his breath, told her he did not understand, that surely after what had just happened, after the scene he had brought into her lobby, she could not possibly still consider him for the position. Vivian told him that the scene had not been his fault, that courage was not the absence of debt or danger but the decision to walk through the door anyway, knowing both might be waiting on the other side. She told him that anyone who could carry a burden like his and still show up pressed and on time for an interview was exactly the kind of person she wanted managing her warehouses. The interview happened anyway, 20 minutes late, in a glass conference room on the 40th floor, with Marcus's hands still unsteady around a cup of water he barely touched. He answered every question honestly, including the ones about gaps in his resume from the months he had spent caring for his wife in hospice, and Vivian listened the way few people in his life ever had, without judgment, without the polite impatience he had grown used to. By the end of the conversation, she did not just offer him the position. She offered to personally ensure that Sorrentino's organization understood, in terms they would respect, that Marcus Webb and his daughter were no longer theirs to threaten. In the weeks that followed, Marcus learned that Vivian's promise was not an empty gesture from a powerful woman enjoying a moment of theater. She made calls. She called in favors from people whose names she rarely spoke aloud, and within a month, the debt collectors stopped coming, the threatening calls stopped ringing, and for the first time since his wife's diagnosis, Marcus slept through an entire night without waking in a cold sweat over money he did not have. Junie started a new school near the warehouse district, close enough that Marcus could walk her there before his shift, and on her first day, she drew a picture of her father standing next to a tall woman in a gray coat, with the words, "The lady who saved my daddy," written in crooked 6-year-old handwriting across the top. If this story touched your heart even a little, if it reminded you that one act of courage can change the entire direction of someone's life, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us what part moved you most, and share it with someone who might need to believe in second chances today. Before we close this chapter, if you have made it this far, please type the word kindness in the comments below, so we know this story reached exactly the heart it was meant to reach. Marcus Webb still works at Halloran Industries today, 3 years and 2 promotions later, and on quiet afternoons when the warehouse floor is calm, he sometimes thinks back to that terrifying moment against the marble pillar, and he understands now that the worst day of his life was also the day a stranger decided his daughter deserved a father who could finally breathe easy, and that sometimes the wrong man to threaten is simply the right man to save.